Welcome to the Daily Cup of Poe. I'm your host, Cindy Poe, and as always, I appreciate you taking time away to listen to what I have to say. I know the value of time, and I will never take it for granted that you are sharing yours with me. So let's grab a cup or a mug of your favorite beverage, and let's get into today's cup with episode 5. We are still a very new podcast here. Very excited about this. I do want to start by reminding you to please follow this podcast and also go to justanamericangirl.com. That is my blog site, and subscribe there with your email to receive weekly updates. My promise to you is to never send more than one email a week. No one needs to hear from anyone in their inbox more than once a week. This is just a way for us to stay in touch, not for me to invade your life. And as always, the links to everything that we're going to talk about in this show today can be found in the show notes. So let's get going. Now today we're going to talk about what is happening with our senior population and the way that we as the rest of the population treat them. And I also want to touch on the subject of ballot harvesting. This is something that has been quite a buzz, especially in the Twitter atmosphere, since Twitter decided to sort of smack the president's hand about a tweet about ballot harvesting. So I do want to talk about that. But first, I want to take a moment to address what happened in Minneapolis and the horrific video of George Floyd, the man who died in police custody while being held on the ground with the police officer's knee on his neck. I debated whether or not to show the video, but I think we've all seen it, and it's just a horrible, horrible thing to watch. And I know that race is being talked about in this discussion, and it should be, but I want to take, for my purposes here in this discussion, I want to take race out of the equation, because to me, this is a matter of humanity. This is not about what the police were arresting him for. He wasn't armed, and it's not about whether he tried to run away from the police. This should be a discussion based around about how the police reacted once they held the man in custody. Now, the video shows such a lack of humanity that it is sickening. How did we get to this place where even in the law enforcement world, the lack of humanity that you could see in the police officers there, it was nauseating. George Floyd was a human being, an American, and this is still America, and somehow we have gotten so far away from what that means that it is frightening. Now, I'm a supporter of law enforcement, and I don't often make big conclusions about videos that you see on social media, because often we don't know enough about the whole story. But this is different. This video, no matter what happened in the minutes or the hours before, this video shows a lack of humanity that is just simply not acceptable ever. We have to do better. America has to do better than this. So I'm going to leave that subject there. The disappointment from what happened with that is just so disturbing to me. And unfortunately, I'm going to go from that subject into what is probably another subject of lack of humanity that has bothered me for quite a while, and that's about our senior population. And I think that what's going on with this coronavirus has really brought this subject to light for a lot of people. Now, from a Christian standpoint, we know that in our commandments, honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you. In Deuteronomy, it says that you do this so that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Respecting your parents, respecting the senior population is so important. And in so many cultures, they do teach that. And somehow in this American culture, we've gotten away from that. God calls us explicitly to honor our parents because the family is the foundation of human society. So in our country, I looked up some statistics that I was very curious about, and we have 21 million Americans living, our senior population living in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. That is 0.6% of our population lives in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. And it's disturbing often when we hear these stories of how this population is being treated in these care facilities. Now, I'm not suggesting that all assisted living facilities or nursing homes are bad, but it is far too often that we hear these horrible stories about how the population in these care facilities are treated. And looking at the coronavirus, I really wanted to look at the numbers because as I was talking the other day about the death tolls, I started looking at the population that, because we know that the senior population are the most vulnerable to this disease. So, I wanted to look at the numbers as it affected our seniors. And upon gathering information, what I learned was 43%, 43% of all COVID-19 deaths in the United States are in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. So that means that 43% of the COVID-19 deaths that have happened to 0.6% of the population. That's staggering to me and a little scary. So when we look at this percentage, this 43%, and we take it by states, and this, what made me really start looking at this is now as we have, I believe, exceeded the 100,000 deaths in the United States due to COVID, which again, I'll do a whole nother show on those numbers because I don't even know how accurate those numbers are, but let's just go with them for the thought process here today. But as we hit that, all we see from the mainstream media and from the never Trumpers is this pointing of fingers that these deaths are somehow President Trump's fault and he's to blame for them. But you now have to step back and you have to look at each individual state, because President Trump he's in charge of, he's running the federal government, but at a state level, that is how these care facilities and this population, this elder population, the senior population we have, this is how they are cared for, is at a state level, not a federal level. So I started looking at the states. And in Ohio, 70% of their COVID-19 deaths were in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. 69% of the deaths in Pennsylvania were in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, which is really disturbing since the health administrator there, Dr. Levin, took her mother out of her care facility and put her in a hotel during this time. And 81% in Minneapolis, or in Minnesota. That's just staggering to me. Like, that is just amazing. So you contrast the decisions by governors like Cuomo, who, blames the CDC. Okay. He went out in his briefing and he blamed the CDC for the fact that he decided to put COVID patients from the hospitals back in the nursing homes. But you have to then look at states, because, like I said, we've talked about Ohio, we've talked about Pennsylvania. Let's look at Florida. You contrast the decisions by governors like Cuomo with those of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. In Florida, all the nursing home workers were required to be screened for COVID-19 symptoms before entering the facility. And on March the 15th, before most states even had lockdown, DeSantis signed an executive order that banned nursing home visitations from friends and families, and also banned hospitals from discharging the COVID-19 patients and discharging them into long-term care facilities. So when New York Governor Cuomo starts blaming the CDC for the regulations he put into place to send COVID-19 patients back into nursing homes, you know that that's just a load of shite right there, because you look at what DeSantis did. So you look at how the states are caring for their populations. And it's very telling when you do that. So let's talk about the nursing homes and the assisted living facilities themselves. Too often you are hearing stories, horror stories, coming out about the treatment of the residents in these facilities. We saw the video, and again, I thought about playing the video, but we've all seen it and it's just too disturbing. We saw the video in Detroit of the 20-year-old who was allowed to wander around, and he videoed himself beating the elderly patient there. It was just horrifying to watch that. And as horrifying as that was, sadly, this is not a rare occurrence. This beating of elderly patients, starving them, having them living in just unacceptable conditions, this is not rare. All you have to do is Google nursing home abuse and you will be sick to your stomach. Google that and hit videos. And look at some of the videos and some of the news reports that have come out of these care facilities. This is where we're putting our most vulnerable population to be cared for. This is just sad. And it isn't, not that this is good, but it isn't just Americans who seem to have forgotten the importance of this senior population. In Ontario, Canada, an extremely damning report, I believe that's how it was posted on Twitter, and it certainly is true, by the military there, was written up regarding several long-term care homes there in Ontario. They listed things like cockroach infestations, patients crying for help, the staff doesn't respond, residents not being bathed for weeks, residents being force fed, and COVID patients, just like we saw in Detroit, being allowed to wander around. Now, something has to be done to protect our most vulnerable population, and this should be an important subject to everyone. One day you're going to be a part of that population, and you have to think about how you want it to be treated, and not just about treating the senior population well by taking care of the nursing homes and the senior living facilities, but also just the way that we treat our older population in general. As Americans, we tend to not respect them. I mean, they've lived through a lot and seen a lot. I mean, I'm only on my, you know, I'm just a little over a half of a century here. I'm hoping I got another half a century in me. But I know what I've learned and what I know and what I've seen, and we have to do better to respect your elders. That's, I was raised being taught to respect your elders, and know that they have something valuable to teach you. They have stories. They have seen things that you will never understand what it was like. I mean, we have it so easy right now. Technology has made everything so easy, and we just have to do better at respecting the senior population and making them feel valuable. They should know how valuable they are. And that goes, of course, with the way that we take care of them, but also the way that we react and interact with them. So keep that in mind. And, let's just do better, America. We have to do better. So, on a good note, yesterday, President Trump announced success in the efforts to reduce the price of insulin for those on Medicare. This was a huge step in the unfair practice of pricing that pharma has going on. There will be a price cap of $35 for a month's supply of insulin. I have to add a little something. As exciting as that news was, and I listened to the entire briefing when President Trump came out and gave that announcement, and I was so disappointed. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, but I still was. I just always am always hopeful when it came time for questions. The questions that the media asked. Here's this wonderful announcement. This project that they've been trying to have success with for years and years and years and years, and they finally have achieved this, and the media just asks the most asinine questions that have nothing to do with what they're there to talk about. I think there was one question about insulin in the whole bunch of media. So I found that very disappointing. But beyond the briefing, when I went to read articles about this good news for Medicare patients and those on insulin, which is a huge population that this will affect, I was looking for articles, and once again, I was disappointed that every single article took an opportunity to do things like spout out polls on voting by the over 65 population in regards to voting for Trump over Biden. And I just don't understand why we can't just be happy with some good news, especially for our seniors. So once again, I say this to the American media, do better. Do better. We don't need any more depressing stuff, and we don't need to find a counter happiness point, something that isn't so happy, or something to make, if your whole goal is just to make Donald Trump look bad, then stop reporting on anything and just go be the tabloid. Just go be Us Weekly, or go be the Star or something like that, and stop trying to pretend that you're media, because you're not. And otherwise, give us this important information that we need without any additional unimportant information that basically isn't even true. So that's what I have to say about that. But I do want to end this with talking about something that I found really interesting. I've been studying this for a while, because I do know that the mail-in voting, I think that it is legal in 27 states, but they want to expand it. Democrats are looking to expand it in all 50. So I've been doing a lot of studying on this, because I have some definite opinions about it. Imagine that, I have some opinions about something. But I was really struck because Twitter flagged a tweet. I think this might be the first time Twitter has done this, I guess in keeping up with Facebook and all their fact checking. But Twitter flagged a tweet by Donald Trump in which he made the case that mail-in voting would lead to voter fraud. That was his opinion. Well, Twitter tagged the tweet with like a disclaimer banner that said, get the facts about mail-in ballots. And when you would click on that, it took you to a Twitter news page where they claimed that voter fraud is unsubstantiated. Okay, well, first of all, Twitter, stop fact checking opinions because this is ridiculous. You can't fact check an opinion. You're allowed to have an opinion, and Donald Trump is an American citizen and he's allowed to have an opinion, and lots of us agree with his opinion. But okay, that's the first thing. But the second thing is all of your claim, it's false, because voter fraud via ballot harvesting has been documented already. This is not new. Now, there's a difference in absentee voting and ballot harvesting. Okay, there is a big difference. I'm not saying that you cannot mail in a vote. That is not the same thing. Absentee voting is a necessary practice. I vote absentee because I live abroad. Military personnel often have to vote absentee. Those who travel for business often use absentee ballots as well. So I don't disagree with the practice of absentee ballot or absentee voting, and there are strict rules that go along with absentee voting, but ballot harvesting is a very different thing. So ballot harvesting, in case you don't know, and you just think that it's just so people can have an easy time and they just mail in their ballots and that's all there is to it. But ballot harvesting is when a third party collects your ballots and turns in the ballots on behalf of another person. So you think about it. There's no state supervision. There's no chain of custody, no limit on the number of ballots that a single person can collect. Ballot harvesters will go to people's homes and often help them to vote. And when you think about this, and this happens in California already, this could lead to, as they're helping them fill out their ballots, this can lead them to pushing them to vote a certain way. Harvesters could pay people for their ballots, pay them to hand over their blank ballots. I mean, fraud could be so easy in this. I mean, there's no way that you can possibly say that there's no voter fraud possible with ballot harvesting. Now, Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, they're pushing for nationwide mail-in voting. And the last stimulus bill, the HEROES Act, or I believe was what she's calling that she sent to the House, that was sent by Pelosi, there is an addition in there for mail-in voting being mandatory for all 50 states. It's already, like I said, legal in, I think, 27 states. I'll have to look for sure about that, but I think it's 27 states, but she's looking for it to be mandatory for all 50 states. I want to read the quote inside of the bill, and it says, all states shall permit a voter to designate any person to return a voted and sealed absentee ballot. Now they're saying anyone. So these ballot harvesters go around door to door collecting these ballots, okay? But how easy is, the only stipulation for this ballot harvesting is that you can't pay someone based on the number of ballots that they collect. That's the one stipulation in the bill, but that's really easy to get around. You can pay them based on their time or the distance they travel around. You just can't base paying them on the number of ballots that they turn in. So there's no supervision and there's no limit. and they can go door to door and help people vote. They could push them to vote in the way that they want them to vote, or simply not turn in ballots from those that don't vote in the way they want them to. Um, One of the best explanations of this, I was watching, I watch all the clips that I can, and I try really hard. I'm going to tell you guys, I try really hard. I subscribe to all the medias. I will sit and watch the videos from CNN and MSNBC. I'll sit and watch through them, but you can never get good information, and you can't even always get good information on Fox. I have to dig really hard to find facts. But Tucker Carlson did a segment on this. It may have been just last night. This has been a very long day already, but I think it was just last night. And I'm going to play that video because I thought he did a fantastic job in explaining how the harvesting has already proved to be fraudulent. So hang on one second. Let me share this with you guys. Here we go.
The past decade, most battles over voter fraud have centered around whether to require an ID to vote, like most every other country does. But in some ways, that's a distraction. We should have voter ID laws, but that's not the real issue. A 1998 report by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement described absentee ballot fraud as the, quote, tool of choice for those who want to steal an election. Again, it's not a theoretical risk. Actual voter fraud has happened, despite what they tell you, all over the country. In North Carolina, by the way, it was Republicans who did it. A Republican victory in a congressional race was overturned after it was discovered that political operatives were collecting blank or incomplete ballots and then filling them out and turning them in. In New Jersey in 2013, not in 1813, 2013, a city councilman was caught paying operatives to travel door to door after mail-in ballots were distributed, telling people who to vote for and offering them $50. Texas has had multiple prosecutions for illegal vote harvesting. Why don't they mention that on television? In 2016, Westlake County Commissioner Guadalupe Rivera won a local election by just 16 votes. Later, Rivera was convicted of illegally assisting people in filling out absentee ballots. So a new election had to be ordered, and Rivera lost. According to the county clerk, Kara Sands, ballot harvesting fraud involves political operatives who target and exploit the vulnerable. Often that means homebound individuals who are too confused to realize their votes are being stolen. You don't think this happens? Oh, yes, it does. Ask anyone who's honest, who's ever covered an election in this country. It happens. In California, ballot harvesting is already almost totally unrestricted. In the midterms, last cycle, 2018, a voter registrar in Orange County described people dropping off hundreds of ballots at a time. Hundreds. 250,000 votes appeared from previously inactive voters who hadn't voted in at least 4 years. 7 Republican candidates were leading on election night, only to lose weeks later thanks to harvested ballots that were tallied days or even weeks later. The past decade, most...
Oops. Okay. So let's just think about that for just a second, okay? This is where you have to, and again, it doesn't matter which side you're on, you have to be behind what is right and what keeps our voting system legal and not fraudulent. This voting in America, that's like the most important thing. And it's very important that we keep it pure. And when you think about this, and these, like he had mentioned, and I looked it up, and everything he's saying is 100% fact checkable. And you think about that, where you had 250,000 inactive voters, inactive for 4 years, and then suddenly they just thought, you know what, this voting thing is so easy when all I have to do is hand my ballots to somebody else and let them take in. That's kind of interesting. But even beyond that, I mean, I think it's so important to keep our voting system, it's worked for 240 years, but let's keep it real. But I just think it's amazing when I listen to this, and I'm going to play another little clip from Tucker Carlson's show where he is talking with the person in charge in Nevada, because apparently in Nevada, and I found this interesting, and I had to go find a bunch of articles about this because this is just mind-blowing. But in Nevada, they are actually suing to get all of these bans and stuff lifted so that they can in fact fraudulently take this election. And so I'm going to play this clip, and then we're going to be closing it up here in just a minute. So let's just get through this one.
Adam Laxalt is outside counsel to Americans for Public Trust, and he's, of course, the former Attorney General of the state of Nevada, now Nevada, and he joins us tonight. Adam, thanks so much for coming on. So you've seen some of this firsthand. Tell us how we should feel about mail-in ballots and vote harvesting.
Well, first, you're absolutely right. This is the game. It's about winning elections and gaining power. And here in my swing state, where we have a lot of very close elections, you're seeing videos now of thousands of ballots that are piled up in apartments, in trash cans, and in hallways. And this is all because we are doing our first mail-in ballot election in the history of our state, all under the cloak of the pandemic, of course. And the Democrats sued a Democrat county, Clark County, which is greater Las Vegas, in order to get all of these extra things that they want to make sure that they can get their wish list. And what do you think that turned out on this thing? Lo and behold, they agreed to all of these conditions in return for the Democrats to get out of the way and let this preliminary election go down. And so what did they get? They got inactive voters. 200,000 of them were mailed ballots all across the greater Las Vegas area. And you know, we have no way to know if these are going to lead to massive voter fraud. And they continue to sue to get rid of signature verifications and to enact the California-style ballot harvesting right here in Nevada.
I assume they call you racist. I mean, that's always what they call you, no matter whenever you oppose their power grabs, obviously. So I'm just assuming that that's what they call you when you say this. But I'm wondering, is there any way to stop it at this point? It seems like they've just come out of nowhere and they're just sort of overwhelming the media and the system with demands for this.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to continue to raise attention, to continue to show, like this video is the reason that we're talking about Nevada voter fraud. Otherwise, you're right, we would have been ignored when we say, hey, things are going on here. When voters all over southern Nevada are trying to get on Twitter and Facebook and say, I'm getting all these ballots to my house, and people that haven't lived here in 10 years. So we do need to raise the attention. We need to put pressure on the Secretary of State and the local registrars to stop this practice. You know, the interesting thing about this, Tucker, is the Democrat registrar in Clark County said, I don't want to mail inactive voters. He said, we've already purged them because the post office told us they don't live at this address. And what happened? His county commission, almost all Democrats, said, you are going to mail inactive voters. This is all in an affidavit, and you could tell he did it very begrudgingly. Yeah. And so now, you know, somewhat egg on their face that this registrar was right, and he said, where are these ballots going to go? There's a postal worker in Las Vegas that was quoted saying, you know, I'm seeing ballots everywhere. They're not secure. What is going to happen with all these ballots? So, you know, we have an election in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks it's incredibly important. The big game, of course, is the general election. We need to keep our eye on that.
So I just found that fascinating. The post office and even the Democrat in charge is like, we're going to purge all these people that, you know, we know are inactive. The post office is telling us, and the people in the Democratic side are saying, nope, you're going to send them all. Postal workers are saying that there are just ballots everywhere. Tell me how you're preventing fraud if you have ballots just all over the place. And as I said, like in apartment buildings and things like that, they're just, you know, piling up and they're everywhere because people are getting multiple ballots to their house because, you know, people who lived there 10 years ago, 5 years ago, they're getting their ballots. So are the people as they move, did they get their ballots? Are they not getting ballots? Like, it just, if you want to have this kind of system, it has to be done better, because ballot harvesting just expands the possibility of voter fraud. And like I said, and I think even Tucker said something to this, I don't want to steal his words, but this is how I wrote it when I was writing up from all the articles I read. It just makes a mockery of the secret voting system. That's the whole point of our voting system. You know, I think that our voting system has worked for hundreds of years, and I know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. That seems to be the big excuse that is being used. But if you can go to Walmart, you can go to the polls. And I know that everyone says, well, the older, our senior population, which, you know, I was talking about caring for them and everything, they're taught, you know, they're saying, well, they're the ones that we need to be careful of sending them to the polls. I promise you, probably most of those people want to go to the polls. They probably want to go to the polls. It'll be the under 30s that will want to, you know, mail in their ballot. And again, if you're using absentee balloting like what I do, it is quite a process for me to mail in my absentee ballot, and I feel pretty confident. Even with that, though, I don't feel 100% confident that my vote is getting counted. But at least there's the signature recognition, which, as you heard, Nevada Democrats are trying to do away with that practice of even the signature verification. And if you do have signature verification, what if your signature was from so long ago, and does it still match? I mean, it's just so much that you just have to look at. And I posted on my social media a video from, I believe it was 2004, where even Jerry Nadler in a congressional hearing was talking about how paper ballots are just not secure, and we have to be careful with that. So I think there's a lot to think about here. I think it's just weird and a little scary that the Democrats are pushing so hard for this. It's something we need to look at. If you need to do absentee voting, apply for it early, follow the rules. But ballot harvesting, letting others take your ballot in for you, is just, in my book, a big, big no. So I'm going to end today's podcast on that note. And as always, I want to leave you with Mama Po's invitation to be fearless, be gracious, and be authentic. Peace out, everyone.